We now have the case back mounted into the CNC machine, and we use the CNC quite a bit on the casework, especially just to achieve the accuracy that we need for the positioning of the glass seats and also for the screw holes. And it becomes that much more critical when you're trying to make a case which has to be water resistant. So the accuracy that the CNC machine gives us is just perfect for this job. So at the moment the tool's spinning and the work is moving around the tool, and we're just creating the glass seat for the eye gasket. So we now have the case middle all machined to size. The internal dimension is correct, and the holes for the screws to hold the bezel and the back on are in place, and also the hole for the pendant tube and the calendar corrector pusher have been put into the side of the case. So the final stage really is now just to solder into the case the pendant tube, and it has to be soldered just because of the fact that the pendant tube is going to be proud of the back, and so basically we have to solder it in order to create a watertight seal. So I've turned down a piece of gold wire, drilled it out and put a lead on the top of the tube here to take the waterproof crown, and that just is a nice, not loose but slide fit in there, and there's enough room for the solder to flow around it and to create that water resistant seal. So the next stage is the soldering process, and as always we use some borax, which I'll just prepare. And basically what we want to do is to just make sure we flood completely the whole of the joint to be soldered. So in fact what I'll do is just slide that out, the tube out, slide it back in again, and we'll know that we've got all the flux in the correct position. Right, so the adding of the solder again, with this what we're going to do is just make sure we have some very tiny slithers of solder. A few pieces dotted around the joint should do the job. If you have one big piece, then the chances are it may just be a bit too difficult to melt and flow properly. So we'll cover our bases by having a few separate pieces. So we'll just apply those little bits of solder with a paintbrush. Making sure we heat the case uniformly, and that will enable the solder to flow through the joint nicely. goes. So we just need to give that a few minutes to cool down. And then we just need to inspect to make sure that the solder has flowed perfectly around the joint to create a water resistant seal. So now we have the completed watch. The case has changed very slightly since I last showed it to you, and this often happens in the closing stages of building the watch. And now that the case and the dial and hands have all been fitted inside the case, it then reveals the true nature of the watch. So it's at this point that we can do the final refinements of the case, and what I ended up doing was to add a profile onto the lugs, which gives the front of the face or the dial of the watch a bit more shape and curve. It brings the dial forward. I think that the two beads that I moved from the case back and bezel onto the case middle have helped and assisted in making the case look slimmer. And since casing the watch up, I have also reduced the height of the front of the bezel and the height of the back of the watch. I left a bit of material on just to for a bit of wiggle room, and that's now been removed. I've added some more curve into the case, and I think it's benefited the overall appearance of the watch. So this now concludes my series on case making, and I hope you've all enjoyed and learnt something from it.